Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Public Works Committee, and thank you for your patience. The Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee did run a little long today. We have, let's see, Mr. Turner, we're needing to postpone one or two?
G2 and G3, Mr. Chairman.
G3, because Ms. McCullough, who will be reporting those items, these are information presentations, is not well this evening. So we're going to slide those over to our February agenda. So we now have just G1 on our general agenda item. There is information before you go, if you're having to leave. Before you go, pick up from Mr. Turner a copy of the list of SDPDA potential projects that were submitted in time to be considered by the Winston-Salem Winston-Salem Urban Area Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. They will not be briefed on this material until March. They will not act on this material until May. But if you want to get in input on which projects you think are particularly valuable, sooner the better. And that feedback can go to me, Mr. Turner, Ms. McCullough, Councilmember Adams, who will all be involved in the recommendations.
Ken, will we get this digitally?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So with that said, as usual, we have 5 items on the consent agenda. Are there any of these items that need to be removed for discussion?
I'll move.
C2.
Move approval of the balance.
Second.
All right. C1, 3, 4, and 5 have been moved for approval. Those in favor will vote yes. Those opposed, no. And for some reason, I'm not showing. Now I'm showing, and I vote yes. Okay. And that is unanimous. Very good. C2, please.
Item C2, resolution approving encroachment agreement with Fiber Technology Networks, LLC.
Presentation, Mr. Turner.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as you recall, the council adopted a small cell ordinance for situations where a pole was going to be installed that was going to be less than 50 feet in height. The company indicated has requested approval for 4 locations in the downtown area. There's one at 5th Street near Liberty, one on 4th Street near the Mercial Plaza, one on Main Street just north of the Federal Building, and one at the corner of 2nd and Liberty Street. Be happy to answer any questions you have about their proposal.
Mr. Larson, I believe.
A couple of questions. First of all, is the city assuming any liability on these posts that are going in our right-of-way? Do we get disclaimers or anything from these companies if the truck hits them, or if lightning strikes them and they fall on somebody, or what? I mean, do we have any protection about the stuff that's going in our right-of-way?
I'll double check, and I'm almost certain that we do, and I also think there's some language in the law that says we're not liable.
Well, I'd like to make sure clarity on that. The second point is some of these that are being proposed today seem to have the ability to put light fixtures on them. You notice that? And I'm curious about if any discussion or whether we have any capability of requesting or having the companies put street lights on them. I noticed the one from Mercial Plaza is showing a street light attached to it, and I'm curious about that. And the third thing I'm curious about is how many of these things can go into our city. I mean, are we just going to at the liberty of, and a different company comes in and wants to put up one beside it? Do we have any ability to control the proximity of these things to each other at all? It seems to me it's turning into going to turn into a free fire zone pretty quickly as to the ability just to install these things, and we have no control over them at all. And I'm getting a little concerned about that.
Prepare a report for your Thursday package.
Mr. McIntosh.
During the process of this, we adopted this ordinance, but we really didn't have any choice in adopting it. This is coming on down from on high in Raleigh. There was discussion about sort of the practical aspect of it and what had been occurring in Raleigh in municipal activity down there, and there was some sort of give and take on locations and ability to nudge or get some heads up about where things were going and to be able to have some input on it. Are we being asked for input here, or do we have any ability to? The reason I ask is, look, node number 329 is right where the mystery pole appeared that we had taken down, because we couldn't figure out who put it up under what auspices. That's right in the view corridor. I mean, we're in a conversation about what to do with Marshall Plaza there. We're getting ready to spend big money, and that is all wrapped up in 3 or 4 different organizations and their long-term vision. We're getting ready to plop a pole down right there. That one in particular, I would hate to see that thing go up.
Mr. Perry, you have a...
As you recall, Mr. McIntosh, last month we had some that came in, and committee members requested that the company relocate them, and the company was amenable to doing that, so we'd be happy to approach them with an alternative location. I would say I did look at that one that you're referring to. It is slightly to the west of the phantom pole that we dealt with, so I think it's in a better location than before, but if it's still not acceptable to the committee, then we'd be happy to pass that information back to the...
Is there a mark on the pavement or anything down there where it's proposed to go? I'd like to...
I think so, but we can ask them to do that.
Yeah, a couple of feet there would make a big difference.
And it's my understanding, our counsel can correct me if I'm wrong, that in specific response, yes, we can say no. If we say it on grounds we're legally allowed to say it on. If we specify this is a particularly bad spot because of X, Y, Z appearance, and we can get away with that. If they won't move it, for example, we can say, no, you can't have it. And if they want to take it to court, they can. If that happens, we can simply say, hey, we propose an alternative spot on the same block. What are you talking about? Go on. Mr. Montgomery had the floor, and then back to Mr. Larson.
Well, I was ready to make a motion to move these items forward with hearing Councilmember McIntosh's questions on this one. I would reserve that motion based upon if he has requests that it be relocated.
If I may suggest, what we can do is we can move approval on condition that that particular one be relocated within the block in a satisfactory manner.
That's my motion.
Is there a second?
I'm not ready to make a second on this yet.
Okay, I'll make a second. We'll get it on the floor for discussion and recognize Mr. Larson.
Thank you. Has any of this been run by the downtown development people at all? I mean, is anybody on 4th Street that has been invested in the downtown and know that these things are coming?
Derwin and I are on the executive committee for the...
And are they aware that these things are going to go up and down their streets in downtown?
Not happy, but they're aware.
These locations, they know they're coming.
I don't know that this location was made aware to anybody before.
We got four locations.
Package.
We got 4 locations, and as a matter of policy, what I'm asking is the people that are most invested in the downtown and are most concerned about the exact location of these things, seems to me that I would like to have them at least have signed off on acknowledging. If they want to tweak them, then let's get that input. But I'm not comfortable speaking on their behalf, considering how much energy has gone into the revitalization of the downtown and the investment of the bid programs and everything else we have down there. So I would offer up an alternative that we hold this for 30 days. We get an opinion from the. We can't.
We don't have the option of holding it.
I'd leave it to the council members.
If we hold it for that additional time, then they will, by default, receive their permission.
When did we receive this? How long ago did we receive this application? How long do we have to even look at it?
45 days, I believe.
We've had it for 45 days?
That's how long we have in order to give them a yes or no response.
When did we receive the application?
I'll go back and check and provide that information.
Well, if this is going to be an ongoing thing with the downtown of these things getting popped up everywhere, you know, and we're going to be on such a short time fuse, on the thing, you know, I think we need a little better policy of how it gets reviewed by the constituents that it impacts. The homeowners or whoever's in front of the property or whatever they have, at least have a comment on it and know the thing's coming. So I don't know what city staff can do about this, but if we get these applications, and at least the people whose property it is in front of should be notified that these things are coming. And if they have comments about it, they can understand as frustrated as I am about not having any control in this matter, seemingly. But the courtesy we can at least do as a city is let them know it's happening.
Don't we notify the adjacent property?
Don't recall that we do, Councilman.
Then if I may make a suggestion, Mr. Larson, if you would care to get with staff and draft a proposed amendment to our policy that we could adopt within the restrictions of what state law permits us to do regarding notification, you know, then
Notification.
we can consider.
I think we need to.
John, I'd like to work with you on that and coordinating that with Downtown
I would
Partnership.
be pleased to have some help on that.
Yes.
For the Downtown Partnership are the only constituent groups in terms of folks who are there. So I wouldn't want anything constructed primarily to ensure that the Downtown Partnership is made. Some of the others we have, which is in the inner city, particularly where you have higher density, where you can't get cell towers where you see these in. And so, yes, that would mean central downtown, but it also means other inner city neighborhoods and communities which do not have organizations that have been institutionalized, such as the partnership. And so just want us to make whatever that is to be careful in reference to that what it looks like moving forward. And so in the sense of, I'm happy we do have the influence to ask for adjustments within where these are located, but also understand that when other utilities are put in place, such as light poles and the transformer boxes and these other things, are not necessarily things that you get all the upfront ability to have a dialogue about most of the time.
And I wanted to speak to the lighting fixtures on the poles. At least as far as the conversation I have heard, these companies are not very friendly when it comes to co-location. They're not looking to offer space on their poles for anybody to do anything other than what their purpose is. Now, if that has changed, I'd be interested in hearing, because we've been looking for locations for cameras for a long time.
And staff has thought that we're going to have some conversations with the companies about, we can come to maybe some, because several of these locations would be ideal for cameras.
Yeah. That would be good.
We can't mandate it, but we can at least
Right.
talk to them.
Okay, further discussion on the motion.
Just to be clear, to answer your question, I would envision notification of property owners impacted visually within a certain distance, and we'd be happy to hear that recommendation from you, that this pole is going in front of their property or in adjacent area to their property, not just neighborhood association. Okay.
All right. All right, those in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Those opposed, no.
A choice.
Yes, vote no. Okay, 3 yes and 1 abstention. That'll go for the journal agenda on Tuesday. We'll now return to the journal agenda and item G1, please.
Item G1, presentation of master plan for Washington Park.
Good evening, Councilman Best and members of the committee. Good evening.
Good evening.
The Recreation and Parks Department was tasked with completing a master plan for Washington Park. We began this process towards the end of August of last year. Hired Stimlin Associates, who was a well-qualified firm to conduct that master plan process for Washington Park. And to kind of go over how we handle master plans and why we chose to handle the one for Washington Park in the manner in which we did, because we feel that although it's our responsibility to maintain and provide the park space and the services to the citizens, it is indeed their park. And so it's imperative of us to make sure that we gather sufficient public input during this process to make sure that we're providing the types of services and benefits to the community that they want. So we began that public input process in September, held a series of public input sessions. And typically what we do is do an inventory and analysis of the existing conditions at the park. It gives us an opportunity to learn a little bit more in depth in terms of what's going on at the park, the reasons why we have a lot of the existing issues that we have at those locations. And then at that time, we take that information and we provide that and we share that with the public. We did that at the first public input session and also use it as an opportunity to gather public input in terms of what they would want to see developed in the park, what types of amenities that they enjoy using, what new things they would like to see introduced into the park setting. We then take that information back, provide a schematic diagram or preliminary master plan, present that to the public, go through that process again of public engagement, gather additional public input, and then come back, revise that plan, and present a final master plan to the community. At that time, again, receive comments in terms of what if the illustrations that we provided to them based on their public input is it meets their needs. We feel that we've completed this process and been successful engaging the community. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly Barb, who's with Stimel & Associates, and she's going to go through the various drawings and go over the site analysis, the preliminary master plan, as well as the budget with you all to see.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name again is Kimberly Barb. I'm a landscape architect. And what we have here, the first image we have is a site analysis. And we took a look at the existing features of the 80-acre park, how this currently lays out, and what some of those elements are. This was helpful in our first initial meeting with the neighborhood associations, very much well attended both with West Salem and with Washington Park, and the general community at large. I'll scroll down. Whoops, I knew I would do that. If I can do that. There we go. So one of the key features here is the park is bisected by Salem Creek. We have a very active northern district, and we have a lot of existing vegetation and wooded areas, steep terrain on the southern end of the West Salem neighborhood. As we progress south, we have the historic portion of the property, which is characterized by a lot of shelters and some facilities that are aged. We have a lot of concerns for safety and just the appearance of the park when we met with the folks there in the neighborhood, and how things are perceived, and then connectivity throughout the park, getting service vehicles in there for maintenance, being able to offer a wide variety of trails, not just concrete walking paths, but having something that offers different levels of activity. One of the other key elements was really the historic significance of this park and how it's played out in the history of the city. It was named for George Washington and his visit to the Salem community back in the 1700s, and then how this is really relative to a high density of population in this area. Also, its connectivity to the downtown core and all the folks living there as well. So move on, excuse me, to the master plan. So we presented our initial phase of the master plan at our second neighborhood meeting, and at each of these we asked folks for their comments, their likes, dislikes, and really vetted what their comments were to us. So here what we've developed is a park that really does look at the connectivity for the neighborhoods, but it creates an active space on the northern side, which is where we've located all the ball fields. Improvements to that include addition of pickleball courts, a large sports complex that would have restrooms and concessions, and an ability to really build on some revenue for the city with the various softball tournaments that happen, as well as other events that could take place here. And we'd like to cross the creek with another bridge. So working within the confines of the creek, we'll have to do a flood study. There would have to be information gathered, a lot of coordination with the stormwater folks here in the city, as well as at the state level. As we progress down, one of the key elements on the historic part of the southern end was to restore the lake. We heard that from lots of folks. it really is a large pond. So when you think of the size of a football field, is about what it would be when it goes back in. And it's roughly 5-foot maximum depth. So we're looking at something that would help facilitate the stormwater, be an attractive feature, and also restore that history. The dog park is also moved to the southern end of the park, and we could provide more parking access to that, as well as shade and the interaction with folks that really enjoy that aspect. The functionality of this park is really important. We have the bisection of the creek, but we want to be able to access that with emergency vehicles. So the bridges that would go in would be something that could take vehicular access and work for the greater good. Again, a phased approach to this project is key. We've done a cost estimate, and we've looked at a phased approach. And with that, you'll have some starting and stopping and looking at the overall project as a whole. Most people just automatically go to the bottom. So relative to this general thought process, we're at about $20 million. When we break that down, the actual site and infrastructure to prepare the property, and it is 80 acres, is roughly $5 million. We have a lot of infrastructure. We've got the overhead power lines at the Duke substation. We've got some other things that need to be addressed. The drive into the park is very unsafe. It's actually on property we don't own through an access by the southern end of that substation. This time of year, it ices over and it gets to be quite treacherous. There's also other things that really need to be improved, the lighting throughout the park, and really updating some things from a safety feature as well. The overall cost for the main part of the project then comes in at roughly, excuse me, I'm trying to scroll down here. We've got about $11.5 to $12 million for that, and what that does is it starts to build these features, restoring the historic shelters, adding a new maintenance facility, which is important to the Recreation and Parks Department, and having those updated amenities for softball and athletic facilities, restoring the lake and putting a pavilion in with an amphitheater so you could get revenue with weddings or events that happen there, and a lot of things that would benefit the community at large. So when we break down the $20 million, roughly 12 to 14 would be in the actual construction costs. And then you've got another $4 million roughly in there that's a 25% contingency. We're looking at this being a long-range build-out, so something that's in multiple years forward, how those costs could be affected. So those are the types of things we do as a conservative approach. There's about $2 million in soft costs, a flood study, surveys, various engineering and architectural fees. So, general gist. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Larson, this in
Well,
mainly
yeah,
South Ward?
this is in the South Ward, and it anchors the South Ward, particularly the neighborhoods of Washington Park and West Salem. It is an old park. It's one of the oldest ones in the city, if not the oldest, maybe, and one of the largest ones other than Miller and Haynes, probably. The thing about this park, which is both a blessing and a curse, is the stream that runs through it. And it has acted to bifurcate the project and has, over the years, caused it to be sort of a helter-skelter approach to how the site is developed and used. The access to the park has been circuitous on property the state or the city does not own. We continue to use that. It's a dangerous right-of-way and a dangerous road to enter that needs to be addressed. But really the two components to look at are, one is the historical nature of the southern part and the early use of that park as a trolley car access park, and the northern part, which would be an athletic center, basic, a recreational center, pickleball courts, softball courts, recreational facilities, pavilion to support restrooms and food and what have you, and a maintenance shed. One of the huge problems we have in all of our parks, I think you can relate to, is the ability to have on-site maintenance abilities, and so this park desperately needs, based on the acreage that we're trying to deal with. One of the advantages, I think, of this is that it ties into West Salem, which the park doesn't currently do. It ties the two neighborhoods together. There's good walking paths and access paths in from the West Salem neighborhood to give access to the northern part of the park. It also protects the green space, and it has an immense amount of topography and woodland, which I think is going to be increasingly important to us. I applaud Stimmel for recognizing that resource early and working with our forestry department to protect those natural resources. for the water, the woodlands, and then putting in plant an active program on the north side of recreational, athletic recreation, then family recreation on the south, I think is a creative and useful process. I applaud the work and fully support it. The neighborhood is very excited about it. We'll hear more about this, I suspect, when the bond discussion begins, but it is a starting point of a long-term development plan. I think all of us realize that it's too big of a bite to take at one time. However, if you don't have a master plan, then you will end up with what we've got now as sort of a helter-skelter, badly maintained, and difficult site to operate. So that's where we are.
Mr. Ratcliffe.
I did want to point out that had it not been for the Washington Park Neighborhood Association and Frank Fry and a couple others, that I-40 would be traveling through this path right now. So back in the mid-'80s, this was the preferred route of Interstate 40 coming through in the neighborhood, put a stop to it, which was obviously a very good piece of work. My question came up, and I asked this at the Recreation and Parks Commission meeting today about flood rise, and do we anticipate having to deal with the kind of things we dealt with at Haynes Park, where we were in a high impact flood zone and ended up in a no rise situation where we couldn't do any work, we couldn't raise any of the ground level unless we lowered it to offset that? Are we going to deal with that here as well? Because that gets very expensive and becomes very limiting.
Yes, Councilmember, those are one of the part of those soft costs that Kimberly mentioned earlier. We would have to complete the flood study to make sure and ensure that any facilities that would be, especially the bridges that are crossing the creek,
right,
would be designed appropriately. But we don't think that we will run into the same sort of very tight situation that we ran into with Haynes Park. We don't feel that that sort of density will be a problem here. We were able to get some bridges, the pedestrian bridge, the existing bridge there now, permitted just through our stormwater department and through staff. We don't anticipate any problems with not to the extent in which we encountered at Haynes Park, but until we get through that process.
Right. You don't know until you don't know.
Yes.
What's that, unknown unknowns?
It's
Or
one of
these are
those
known unknowns.
It's a known unknown, but we don't think that it'll be a stopping point that would prohibit us from moving forward with the plan.
Right. Great. Thank you.
You are aware that you're going to be, if you go through with this plan, you're going to be eliminating one of the historic features of the athletic fields. You swap the dog park and put it on the south side and take that athletic field number 1 and put it on the north side instead. You're going to be eliminating the historic left field water hazard.
Well, it's been more so of a duck pond and ice skating rink in the more recent weeks, but I think it'll be a welcome change for the users of that ball field.
I was always glad I was playing right field. Anything, Mr. Montgomery?
Yes, but not directly about this park in essence, but to Councilmember McIntosh's point, which I'm happy that the work was done in the past to ensure that this location exists as it is. Conversation that I had recently with individuals about questions of equity and equity in our communities historically, and so this is a prime example of how racial inequity in neighborhoods saw preservation of certain things because of how individuals were able to stand up for their communities as opposed to other neighborhoods unable to do the same thing, and how we see development happen from our historical perspectives. And so we still continue to deal with how those decisions have been made.
If I might add, sort of a historical note as well, that this park, of course, was part of a string of pearls, basically, that included Happy Hill Park, which, of course, you're working on very aggressively, going over to Civitan Park, and, of course, going around the southern part all the way up to Miller and Haynes Park, sort of creating this crescent around the perimeter of the city. It's interesting that when Nissen Park opened, this park became the African American Park. It was designated as the African American Park. How long that occurred when segregation of the two parks, Nissen Park and Washington Park, but eventually, of course, that would be dissolved. with the character of the park has evolved over time. Land has been added to it, but it is, I think, an important icon, as you say, historically to the city as a place of recreation over time. So I'm thrilled that we are finally getting a master plan on it.
Where's Nissen Park?
Nissen Park was basically out near where the new police station is, out in Wartown Road, where the what is it? Nissen Wagon Works is.
Is it
Yeah.
gone?
It's gone. It's gone. I went out looking for it, actually. There's a big flat place out there.
I didn't think I'd missed it.
There's nothing much left. The traces, because it was at the end of the trolley car line, and if you know where the Shell station is, the Shell station, the trolley car made a turn. If you look at that corner, you'll see that corner is rounded. Trolley car turned there, went on to Peachtree, and right over then, just across Wartown, that's where Nissen Park was. So this park survives beyond that.
Interesting.
Do we need a motion on this?
No, this was an information item.
Good. Well, I support it.
And thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Is there anything else to come before the committee this evening? Mr. Turner?
As it happens now.
Thank you very much. Then we will be adjourned.
Yeah.